So how do you think SEO is going to change this year, if it's going to change at all?
That's the thing. I've been talking about this for years. It really doesn't change that much. Google does pull some levers and they do manipulate things a little bit, but the baseline concept doesn't change all that much. What might change is that for the last 4 or 5 years, Google has been just hostile to affiliate sites, sites that aren't their own brand, they aren't their own company, they aren't actually selling anything on the site. And that hostility will continue. There will be winners and losers. There will be winners that are those types of sites, but the less that those sites make themselves, a real company, the harder it's going to be for them to succeed. And so I don't really see much of a change other than people that refuse to adapt to understanding that that's where Google is shifting their preference in the SERPs. They're going to struggle, but the more you can become real, the better chance you have. But that's just been the case for years and years and years. So I don't see anything new happening this year. I just see maybe people having more frustration if they aren't, Pinocchio needs to become a real boy at some point, right? And that's what a lot of sites have to do. They have to present themselves as a real site rather than a site that is just winning some keywords for the purpose of that traffic alone. Like there has to be something else going on that site that establishes that it's a real thing, that it's an entity that should be ranked.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was speaking to Jackie Chow this week, and he was talking about how niche sites could potentially end this year because it's so easy to create content. You can build backlinks. The barriers to entry are so low that you have to do something to make your content unique or to build a real brand. What do you think on that?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't think that they will die or end. There will always be, and there will always be those ones you can point to. It's like, hey, these guys are doing it. Why can't I? Kind of a situation. But it's not so much the niche site. It's the site that refuses to take ownership or present like who is responsible for the website, who is responsible for the content. And then are they offering anything new to the conversation? We listen to how Google frames things. Their issue with duplicate content isn't that it's duplicate necessarily. It's that it doesn't add anything new to the conversation. That's also an issue with AI content. AI content is basically duplicate content. It's spun content. It's spun remarkably well. But at the end of the day, it's just taking content that already exists and it's spinning it and putting it out again. And so that doesn't add anything new to the conversation. And so the trap that niche sites fall into is that they end up just producing a lot of duplicate content. And so it's not that they're a niche site necessarily. It's that they aren't a forward-facing company or a forward-facing brand. They often don't take ownership of who's responsible for the site or who's responsible for the content. And then at the end of the day, the content that they're often putting out is duplicate. It's not adding anything new to the conversation. And so if you're not adding anything new, there's really no reason for you to be in the search in the first place. And then Google, I think, will implement things as they've continued to do to squeeze down on those so they can get to the sites that are actually adding something new to the conversation.
So if you're using AI tools to generate content and essentially just generating content with one click, how do you add something unique and more value to it?
Well, that's where things like brand, tone, voice, facts, and then certain elements of uniqueness would come into it. I don't really see using AI content all that different from using a content mill in the Philippines 5-6 years ago. You get the same type of content. Just the AI content is faster and it's obviously cheaper than what that was, but it's still the same type of content. It's not anything that's really adding any new perspective to it. You can't give something to a concept to a 3 cent an hour word type writer and expect them to come up with a brand new perspective on something. That's where you need to come in. What is the purpose of your site? And the purpose of your site should then kind of set the direction for the tone of what you're talking about, the point of what you're talking about, the facts they're introducing. And then there should be within all that a uniqueness should emerge because that's what you're doing. And so the more you edit that content, the better. And I think maybe what's the reason for this site? What are we trying to get across? And obviously sites are maybe trying to sell something that's a baseline concept, but really what else is this site trying to do? And why is it here? And what is it offering to the public that another site is not? And I think if you can answer those questions, then you can have that niche site because it is going to become that thing that is adding to the conversation. But if you really don't have an answer to that question, that's where I think you might struggle.
That makes sense. With the SERPs being very messy right now, obviously you got sites like Reddit and LinkedIn and Parasite SEO working better than ever and being absolutely smashed with all sorts of content in all sorts of dodgy niches. Do you think that there's going to be some big changes coming from Google this year, or how do you think they're going to react to that?
Well, they'll react to it if it really affects their bottom line. If it really does cut into ad revenue, then they will certainly do something about it because ultimately at the end of the day, they're trying to make money. They're not an altruistic being providing knowledge to the universe. I mean, that's not their purpose. Their purpose is to make money. They're a corporation. And like in a broader point, I always find it funny when people are shocked when corporations do bad. It's, if at the end of the day, the morality of a corporation is to its shareholders, to the people that make it money. And so it's going to have to make decisions. What is moral to a company is to make the most money, really. Because if it doesn't make money, then it doesn't exist. So Google will make any decision it needs to make on the SERPs if it dramatically impacts their bottom line. And that's also like when you think about SGE type stuff too, like what shows up in the SERPs. If it cuts into their revenue, they'll change it. They'll make it so that it doesn't cut into the revenue, or they'll figure out a way to monetize in a particular way. I kind of got lost in that question, but I can't remember where we started. I apologize. But the main idea is that however it's going to shake out, Google's going to make money. And if they're, with like Red and Core, if that's a problem, they will adjust it if their bottom line stays good. Because an interesting point on why like a Reddit or a Quora might show up is that in a way, the truthfulness or the veracity or the importance is crowdsourced. In a sense, there are upvotes and downvotes, and people can get in and express their opinions. And it gives an opportunity to give a layer of fact checking to content where the community can decide if it's good or not, for better or for worse. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it, but you can see the push for that because if somebody makes a statement, then people can comment on it. And you can get instant feedback as to whether or not this is reliable, if it's valuable, if it's useful, if it's interesting. And so you can see why that might go in because Google can't do that. They're an algorithm for ranking. They're not an algorithm for truth. They can't verify anything beyond what is in their algorithm. And so having sites that are doing some form of that, I can see why they would have a preference for those types of sites. And they even say that in their guidelines about how much they like UGC, and that's because it's an indicator of what's happening actually on that page. If people like that content, if they respect that content, if they respect that content creator, they're asking them questions. It's all a signal that this is perhaps more likely than not good content. And so I can see the push towards that, but they'll keep doing that so long as they're still making money. And if they're not, then I think they would certainly change. As you said, the SERPs are a bit of a mess. But if they can keep their money and people are still coming back, then they're going to keep it like it is. If not, then they will change.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think most people don't realize this is the fact that Google is a company that seeks profit, not potentially. I mean, obviously they want both. They want the best search results and they want profits. But if you compare them in the rankings, probably profits is going to be number one and then the best plus number two, right?
So I always ask like my dad and his wife, how do you search? Like, well, what are you guys doing? Because they are your average unsavvy searcher and they are fine with Google results. They don't have any problem with Google results. And they go to large aggregate sites to search for things like airplane tickets and stuff like that. They'll go to an Expedia or, Travelocity to search. I don't do that, but they do. and they're happy with those results. And when they need information, they type it into Google and they get Google results. And I asked them, what do you guys think about like any of the format updates you've seen recently? And they were kind of like, what updates? Like it's not anything on their radar. They see like different fancy things, but they've always seen that, Google's always putting in things like, a carousel here or a listicle there type thing that shows up within the SERPs. And they just see that as normal and it hasn't impacted their lives at all. And so I honestly think the people that complain about SEO results are SEOs and sites with an axe to grind. But after that, your average user that's not building a web page and is just doing search for information is overall, I think, pretty happy with the results they're getting. And that's why they keep coming back.
Yeah, sometimes we're just too close to it, right? We're like,
I mean, we're looking at it like at this level, and they're just like, I just need to find a restaurant. A restaurant near me has got to be one of the largest searches that the vast majority of people do, and they get restaurants near them, and they're pretty happy about that.
just thinking of questions around that. I think
I can
we're,
go one. I can go one step further. You know how like SEOs are really popping off like 4 years ago that voice search was going to change all things. Yeah, the number one voice search is, "Hey Google, what time is it?" And then, "Hey Google, what's the weather?" And then, "Hey Google, can you play this song?" It changed nothing in SEO because that's not how the average person they're not using voice search to figure out any kind of complex, even not complex problem in their lives. They use it for convenience for those specific things. So the average user is not, I think, impacted too much by what's happened in Google recently, and at least not the ones I'm talking to. And I don't know that Google's share of voice has dropped in the search market since any of these things have been implemented. Again, the people that are upset are websites that got hit and SEOs.
yeah.
And I think the general user is pretty oblivious to and ambivalent to any of those changes.
Have you seen any of the news around Google and antitrust?
I watched that a little bit, but I'm a bit of a cynic there. I'm pretty sure whatever issues come out of that, they'll just, oh no, we had to pay $4 billion. Like they're $1 trillion company. I mean, how much money do they make in a day? I don't even know that's daily revenue for them.
That's interesting, actually. What was the actual issue involved there?
Oh, I don't know. There are several antitrust going on at the moment, but at the end of the day, I think they're all going to shake out the same way. They pay a fine, a government gets some money, everyone wins. Search goes on.
Do you think that SGE will change much in 2024? The obvious one that I see is that informational content where you just get a quick answer is going to get answered within Google now. You're not going to click on like, why do ducks eat cucumbers on the first list of pages. But do you think search generative experience changing much as well?
Well, I think we need to look back and see what featured snippets did. And, featured snippets were supposed to be the end of the internet, right? When they came out, and that everyone was going to lose all of their traffic. And I don't know that really happened. I think there was maybe a bit of a haircut, but it wasn't the dramatic thing that really people were prognosticating. And then people realize it's actually not a bad idea to be in there because people will read the little snippet and then they will click in. And it actually gave 2 or 3 opportunities to rank because you've got different types of feature snippets, but then some feature snippets might be text with an image and those could come from 2 different websites. So it turned into another form of optimization or something to consider as you're putting things in. I see with SGE something similar. It's going to be other forms of optimization. Ultimately, I think people will try to get into them. There's the idea of we could just block Google and not give them our content. And while in theory, that's a nice idea, I don't think that's practical at all. And I don't think we can get all the websites on board to do that. I have seen, it is comical to me and it's quite ironic where Google says, you can't take people's content and then all they're doing is taking people's content and putting it up for their own purposes. I mean, that's theft. The hope is that it is a little more clickable so that content creators can get rewarded for the stuff that Google is obviously prizing. If it's not valuable, then Google wouldn't be putting it into those different areas. So the hope is that it becomes a little more clickable and becomes more like a featured snippet where it is easy to get into. And it is likely people get in there if they're getting a little bit of the answer they need and they need some more. Places that will struggle are the places that struggle with featured snippets. If you tell what time is it in Rome, the answer comes up and there's no reason for me to click into any website that's going to tell me the time in Rome. Those sites got hurt. Similar type queries might get hurt as well in this, where it is just a one-line answer and there is no reason to look farther into the website. But I don't know how many websites fall into that category or how many will actually have that issue, especially if they're answering questions about things or if there's more information that can be had, then I think they're going to be okay.
So if you were starting SEO all over again this year, how would you try to increase your income? Like, how would you try and start making money on Google?
Well, I mean, I guess what am I selling? What am I trying to do here? I don't think I would build a site that is just an affiliate site, where I'm trying to then funnel traffic to Amazon to make money. I don't think that is the best play right now. I would try to make my site as brandable as possible, as e-com store looking as possible. I I don't think that many e-com stores got hit by HCU, did they?
I didn't see a massive amount of them get hit. The ones that I saw take the biggest hit were websites where they're answering a lot of informational queries. And those
Yeah.
questions just got replaced by UGC, Reddit,
Yep.
LinkedIn, Quora.
Yep.
These are the sites winning from that.
So I think it's still a good idea to create content that answers questions for sure. But there has to be more of a goal to it than just that. To answer the question, I think having a brand or a store of some a form will only protect you more. So obviously you can have some affiliate stuff. Obviously you can go for display traffic, but I would also make sure that you look a little more brick and mortary than maybe people would want to do 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's talk about on-page SEO then. Quick question. I was trying to figure this out for ages and I couldn't get a reasonable answer from anywhere. I Googled it. I was checking on chat. I was checking on YouTube. What are entities? Because I've seen so many different definitions. I think I have the right understanding of it, but I'm not 100% sure.
An entity is a thing. that's that's what
All right.
and
We can move on now.
yeah, purpose is an entity is a person, place, organization, event. That's
How,
where that's what an entity is.
how does it differ to keywords though? Because I think this is where people get stuck.
Okay. While an entity is a thing that can be identified, maybe where it gets a little confusing, it can be conceptual because just putting the word kitchen on a page, Google might understand that that's a thing, that that's a kitchen, but then what are you actually talking about? So if the other words on the page are refrigerator, stove, cabinets, you might be actually talking about an actual kitchen. If the words were like remodeling in nature, now you're talking about like fixing a kitchen or, some aspect of design. You talk about French colored wallpaper, or something, French country. My mother changed just to like, what are they called? French countryside. She thought that was pretty awesome, I think, in the, in the 90s. So you're talking about designing a kitchen, or you could be talking about love and family, and the kitchen is the heart of the home. And when there are major events, a lot of people come together and their families join together in the kitchen. So in those three examples, you're all talking about the entity kitchen, but where keywords are going to come into is like, what are you actually talking about? What is this concept? So in each of those things, it is the kitchen, but it all has a different concept. So the entity would be the kitchen, but then your keywords or your other contextual terms are going to then tell you what you're actually talking about.
Because I think one of the biggest problems, and this is the reason I asked, is like with ChatGPT content, you can generate the content, you can create as much as you want all day long, but it's not really optimized contextually in terms of entities, or you can implement LSIs, but there's a lot of fluff in there. And it's like, how do you optimize the content in a way that's not just content, but it's contextually relevant and very clear to the algorithm that it's optimized?
Well, it's fluff because it's just spun content.
Yeah.
That's why it's fluff. It cannot get specific because it has to stay general because it doesn't know what you're talking about. It has no idea, and it can't guess for you either. It can't guess what you're talking about. It's guessing at the words that are most relevant to what you've asked it, but that's all it is. And it's going to. I saw a good example of somebody trying to do a write up on like fitness, like smartwatches or something like that, or apps for smartwatches, something like that for fitness. And it actually could list 10 that existed. And I think the person was, in this example that I was being shown, 6 were actually pretty reasonable to be on a list. But then like the information under it is this app is a great app for being an app was the main thing, but it's 'cause it didn't know anything about that app. It's not going and looking at that app and pulling out good information, saying general things about it. So it can get you generally, but because it is spinning, as I mentioned, in a very amazing way, it is still just fun content. And so it can't get specific.
Similar question. What is a semantic triple?
Semantic triple. All right. So I believe how that's defined by some people that use it is that they're looking at essentially saying the same thing like 3 times in a row or getting the concepts nested together is I think what they're shooting for. And I think the idea there is that you're making it abundantly clear what you're talking about by clustering your semantic concepts together. This is not my concept, so I might have misstated that. And I don't want to put words in other people's mouths on what those things are. My opinion on stuff like that, it's one way to approach kind of looking at the same problem. I think if you are hitting your important terms, when you're talking about, in the kitchen example, you are hitting stove and refrigerator and stuff like that, those things happen on their own. because you've hit the terms. So I guess you could look at it in terms of we need to cluster these things, or you could just say we need to hit these term counts or term frequency for things. But I think you're going to get to the same result in the end. It's probably just a way of how you like to think about it. And in terms of like how you do your writing and how you do your outlining and how you do your organization for the content you're going to put out. Maybe thinking about it one way might be better than the other, but at the end of the day, they're all probably going to get about the same way, because really at the end of the day, you still have to write in understandable. You don't have to write in understandable sentences, but you will write in understandable sentences because you speak, your native language, and it's impossible to write so incorrectly that you would miss those things. If you've got the topic and what you're trying to get at, you can't not write correctly. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, this is what I wonder. It's like, there's a whole rabbit hole that you can go down with semantic SEO, and it can get as granular or as complicated as you want it to be. And the same with entities or LSIs or keywords, and these things do help, absolutely. But if you're structuring your content in the right way and you're planning it ahead of time, then actually, as long as you're thinking about the content that you're writing, you are going to cover entities and keywords and LSIs naturally within the content, because you've got a well-structured article that covers everything someone will want to know about that topic already, right?
100% right. I say this all the time. When you learned how to write a Roman numeral outline, in like year 6 or 7, right? You had to sit down and do it, and it was awful and you didn't want to do it. And then you go to, I don't know if you could hear that. Something's attacking my house.
Here's what come for you finally.
No, this is it, guys. This is it.
We got it live. We've got
When
footage.
you learn how to do the outline, I dismissed it. I was like, this is a waste of time. And then what you'd want to do is when you have to write the essay, you just want to sit down and start writing. And then what happens is you write a terrible essay. If you'd taken the time to write the outline, then you end up writing a really good essay. And it's the same thing with this kind of with content for web pages. People love just to sit down and just start writing. And then they write something that doesn't get to the point, it doesn't get to what is actually needed. And if they took the time to write, a title, and then all of, say, their H2s, which would be the sections on a page as you're writing, you're going to write a much better web page. And you have to get to the counts that you need. You have to get to your semantic triples or whatever you're trying to get at, because you wrote that outline and that outline is on point, and then you're filling in the stuff on that outline. It becomes so much harder to miss what you're doing. But if you just sit down and start to write, I can tell you it's going to be garbage and you're going to miss all those things. And then you really should have focused on whatever it is you're supposed to, like, you should have focused on your semantic triples at that point.
Do you have any unpopular opinions on ChatGPT?
Do I have any unpopular opinions on ChatGPT? I don't know if they're unpopular. I mean, it's a liar. It confidently lies too. But, just because it sounds like a human when it's responding to you doesn't mean that it's a human. And it doesn't even mean it can't admit when it's wrong because it doesn't know when it's wrong. Here, maybe this is an unpopular opinion. ChatGPT will be gone in a year.
Interesting.
This time next year, a new language model will have come out that will take away ChatGPT. So much so that everything we're talking about now in ChatGPT will be irrelevant.
My views are going to be down on YouTube.
Well, here's the thing. It's not the tool, it's the concept. And where people get left behind is when they're only using a tool and they don't understand the why. If you understand the why of things, it doesn't matter what tool comes along, you can adapt and to that technique or to that tool or to that strategy or to whatever it might be and still be very, very successful. Where people get lost and left behind is when they think, oh, it's ChatGPT, but they don't understand the why of what you're trying to accomplish or what's behind it. And so as long as you can still maintain a framework for what you're trying to accomplish and why you're trying to accomplish it, it doesn't matter what that tool might be that comes up next that is better. But as language models develop, I can't see ChatGPT or GPT-9 as being where everything ends up. There will be better language models that come out. There will be better things. And I think at the rate that they're going, I bet GPT is done in a year.
Why is that specifically?
Because of the problems that it has. I don't know that giving it more information makes it better. In fact, it actually might make it worse. And it's limited by how much information it has. And I don't know that it gets any better by getting more information. And so I think that's the limitation of this particular model. And don't get me wrong, it's phenomenal and fantastic. But, as we talked about, it can't get specific. It doesn't know anything. It's not creating anything. It's not AI. I mean, it's not intelligent. It's regurgitating a best guess on words that it already knows. And because of that, that's how it gets information wrong. That's how it lies. It just seems so friendly because it's such a friendly interface. You want to believe it, you want to work with it. But I think because of those limitations, something will come along that'll get rid of those limitations. It'll overcome those limitations. And when that happens, then GPT in this language model, I think will be irrelevant.
That's an interesting one because a lot of people ask me now, right? If ChatGPT can answer your questions, why do people still use Google? It's one of the questions that I ask a lot on my YouTube channel. I think part of that is due to the stickiness of Google, but also how unreliable and how overconfident ChatGPT is when it comes to supplying answers.
Well, sure. Do you remember? I don't know how old you are. Do you remember like the kid in school that would say something absolutely ridiculous? Where'd you get that? And they would say, I read it in a magazine. That's ChatGPT. That's the ridiculous friend that's saying something absolutely ridiculous that's unverifiable and they read it in a magazine. The reason that Google works is because there are 10 answers and I can go in and I can actually then evaluate the source of this answer. ChatGPT doesn't have a source. It can't tell you the source because it doesn't have a source. It has this bank of words and it's pulling out of that. It doesn't actually know where it's going to. So if you ask it, how much does Jupiter weigh? Did it get it from NASA? That information, or did he get it from joelovesbigrocks.com? Like, I would prefer that the answer came from NASA than
That is a
that, but
great website, though. Jill's
you
website.
know, but I mean, like, who knows where this information is coming from? And so it basically ChatGPT read it in a magazine. That's the level of confidence you can have is that one friend that has no source and makes wild claims. Is that friend right sometimes? Absolutely. Is he wrong sometimes? Absolutely. But there's no way for you to know. That's why you still have to go into something like Google that gives you the opportunity to evaluate sources and say like, okay, this is the correct answer.
That's what I was thinking was like, if ChatGPT was my friend, or even worse, if ChatGPT was an employee at, say, Goldie Agency, how long would ChatGPT actually last? Because if I
It
had a
wouldn't.
friend who was hallucinating fat, ignoring my instructions half the time, or I give it an SOP and then halfway down the conversation, it reverts back to what it wants to do. Like you say, it wouldn't last very long, right?
No, not at all. I mean, that's a funny point. Like, we use GPT-4 for pop. It doesn't listen sometimes. It just, we were like, oh, your content is terrible. It's like, it's not my content, friend. That is GPT. As though I built some AI writer. Nobody built their own AI writer. It cracks me up. And sometimes it just won't listen. I need 1,000 words. And it's like, here's 250. It's like, no, that isn't what I asked for. But yeah, it gets persnickety. It gets finicky. It does what it wants to do sometimes. And you're absolutely right. That employee would be fired immediately. And it comes up with no ideas. If you gave it a prompt for something, if it was intelligent, it'd be like, hey, that's not the best prompt. Are you trying to get to this information or that information? Okay, you want this prompt, but it can't do that. And it's not doing that because it just doesn't know. It can't create anything. It can't foresee what kind of information you might be. It can't predict what you're looking for. And as a result, it can't be helpful in that way.
I know you mentioned Page Optimizer Pro, and obviously I've tested it with some workflows. In fact, I checked it today before our interview, and that content still ranking that we published a case study on. How it's perfect timing. I have to say it.
And our website tanked.
And we got a penalty.
We have a manual. I haven't seen a manual action in 3 years, and we just got.
So when it comes to building a tool like this, and I'm only asking this because I know a lot of people with the open API from Playground being available to everyone. Everyone's thinking about building their own AI tools. How did you find launching a SaaS? Like, was it challenging? Would you recommend it to other people?
Well, I can tell you it's the most fun project I've ever worked on in my life. And, you're not just building a tool, but you're also building a business as well. And so there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of fun for me. And I think people like yourself and the people watching this, we like solving problems. We like solving business problems. And SaaS is both of that. You're solving a particular use case problem, but then you're also, as a business, as running a business, you're solving your business problems. Those are fun things for me. And I like thinking about those things. I can say I highly recommend people build their own tools. It's not that tricky. I don't code, but I do have ideas. And it also doesn't need to get expensive either, especially in terms of most tools have APIs. And you could build something internally, even if it's not to market. You could build something for your agency, or if you're doing your own site, you could build something internally where you can pull in data and sort it and present it to yourself the way you want it. What people are likely doing now is they're going into some tool. They're getting the data out there, maybe getting into a spreadsheet, and they're kind of moving stuff around a bit. That's time consuming. You could build a very simple tool using some dev off Upwork that understands APIs, and it can pull into a dashboard for you or into a spreadsheet for you with not that much work. And then it's immediately presented in the way that you want it. And it's a fun project, but it could turn into a huge time saver for you. And if you're saving time, then you're probably making more money, or at least saving money just by getting the information you're using now, get it presented the way that you need it rather than however it's presented in a way. Because most people, fun fact about users is most of them will use your tool not the way you intended. They'll find a way for them that makes sense, and they'll clue into on something. And so that's, I think nearly every user does something like that. They'll use it generally speaking, but there's always gonna be something that isn't exactly how you thought. That you could build a very simple tool that could pull in that information and get however you're using it or however you're formatting or structuring it immediately structured for you. And I'd encourage people to do that.
The other thing I wonder as well is like in SEO, sometimes we have a tendency to sit within our own bubble and not think bigger in terms of, okay, yeah, we can be a freelancer or an agency, or we can run our own niche sites. Building your own tools, most people feel like it's outside of their capabilities. But like you say, you don't need to be a developer or a coder to do that. It's quite easy to find someone who can help you along the way, right?
Oh, absolutely. There are tons of people, and really if you're pulling in APIs, then you're just dealing with the front end. You're just dealing with how it looks. That's a JavaScript developer is what you're looking at. And then somebody that understands pulling in APIs, and that's just the API key that's about this long. You plug it in and then it gets filtered and presented in the way you want. It's not overly difficult. And it's something that I think most people can do. There are a lot of APIs out there that are really good. Pop is releasing its API shortly. So if you like the data, but you don't like the dashboard, make your own. And then you can also then pull in, let's say you use this tool, and that tool, and you actually kind of line up columns or you kind of incorporate the data somehow in a system that works for you. You can actually probably get an API from those three and put it in and get that information presented in one dashboard for you. And with minimal amount of dev work.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then also when you come to sell a business like a SaaS or a tool, the multiples are far higher than if you were selling, say, an agency, right?
Oh, certainly. I think the average multiple for an agency is somewhere around 2.5, kind of on average. And a SaaS, you're looking at 5 to 10, most likely.
Awesome. Anything else you want to say before you go?
No, it's been a lot of fun. I do think when you're looking at different revenue streams, a small SaaS tool could be one for you. Maybe I spoke about this, I think in 2019 at Chiang Mai SEO, and that you could build a SaaS that solved one problem and solve your own problem. And if you've got that problem, somebody else has that problem. If you could sell it at a no-brainer price for like $9.99 a month, where people just wouldn't unsubscribe and it solved that one problem, you could probably build out a bunch of those and do halfway decent. Might be something to look into for 2024.
I mean, for me, I have a couple of ideas in mind that we're probably going to launch pretty soon. So I'm interested to see that. Like you said, it has to be something that's recurring as well each month, right? It's like if it's just a one-off and you're not using it as an ascension funnel, then there's no point. It's all about the amount.
But then you can also get at that price point though, where it almost is harder for people to cancel because they have to go figure out how to cancel. We've all got those things on our bill. It's like, what is this $7.99? Like, it's not even worth it. So you could get at that price point, then you might lock some people in that way.
There's some way you just give up halfway through trying to end it. You have to click like 5 different buttons.
Yeah. Like you have to remember your password. That's impossible.
All right. So what's the best way to contact you? Obviously you have Page Optimizer Pro. We'll leave a link in the comments and description.
Internet marketing gold as well. img.courses, or they can go to kyleroof.com as well.
Perfect. All right. Cheers then.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks.